Yeah, even it's the market that
How will I buy pen for 60 euros?
huh?
How will I buy a pen for 60 euros?
Yes, even for €5, you can.
That's my question. Why would I buy pen for 60 euros? No, because I can buy a pack for 2 euros.
No, but
In action.
yeah, but this I really writing this in the office. It's very even if a person is very solid.
Good morning.
Because the problem is you buy
have fun.
and die out. That's what happened to me. I bought a pack of pen and then everything died. And then I thought, okay, I use this. Because you can feel forever.
Really?
Yeah.
So do you top up the
Yeah, but even this.
I'm on the clock.
Because if you buy a pack of
I kind of want to move from using paper and pen to using Remark.
So this one got a proof in one.
I want to use Remark. I do
If also I go to the markets, it's just I go to the and then I just figure out where take up and I keep it forever.
Okay. I'll think about
It's easy. Because you mentioned something.
For me, I prefer buying those ones because number one, I'm a fit and clean. Number two, I want to convert from using using computer.
Yeah, but that's the point. When you write, and when I write it in the office, I just write videos. When I talk to me, I write. So it's what I should do. Because sometimes it's called me.
Yeah.
And then it's the install. And I don't want to share because if I share, it disappears.
I understand.
9:15.
Now during COVID, I bought lots of vitamins. And because I was a fashion
You should appreciate the right session.
and then a lot of them dried out.
How do you this kind of shortage of fireways? What do you want to start to do?
Because I need to write minutes when someone talks to me. I need to
Want to work very.
I need to be related.
Where from Lori?
Now that's the way I work. Most people work this way. And when you go to a meeting to prepare yourself,
Yeah, I do. I have to just I'm trying to say.
We wanna go to Alan.
no, because if there's a power problem, if you have the problem with the internet connection, because if I put everything from work into work, if there's an internet connection issue, sometimes we have a connection issue, connectivity issue, and you may lose everything as well.
Please don't scare me.
No, but that's the reality. It's not a risk.
So the session will start by 9:15, and one of the panelists is available on the Zoom link, and it would be nice if you can sit down in that place so that you can start.
Is it not 9:15? Is it 9 o'clock?
And 9:15, it will start by 9:15, but before 9:15, everyone needs to sit on their appropriate space.
We also be trying to know.
No. It's a cheap.
Yes,
Because it's something interesting. No. Like that, supposed to provide me that I know that it's present, it's not the extra.
Hello, good morning, sir.
This was not
Yes, on the right track. See, right on This is So please, with Paul Oroko Mije. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear us, Mr. Bright?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So you are still waiting for the chair, and if it's not around, I think one of the panelists can decide to chair the session so that we can start by 9:15.
Oh, that's right, right?
That's Bright, yes. Okay,
I can't hear you.
it's a line, like, I mean,
Okay. Okay. Who's four? Oh, yeah, I see.
like, sir. Oh, yeah, Mr. Paul, sir. So we are expecting you to be here to chair this session. Okay, sir. So you can have a seat because the session will start by 9:15 and you're already in 9:15. You can sit down over there, sir. Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, so this is that. There's one for air. And the man on the Zoom, good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm fine. I know. So
I'm fine, thank you.
all right. When we start by, I will go through the papers and their names to know who is here and who is on Zoom. I begin by looking at the feet on the ball, minds on their rights, women, football, and protests in Eastern Nigeria. So by Ekweme, by Bright Alozie and Timothy Anyam. Are they here?
Yeah, I'm Bright. Yeah, my co-presenter, yeah, it's not with me at the moment.
Okay. You are welcome.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
We have environmental and social risks of exclusive remnants of war in northeastern Nigeria by Jamal Danga. Is he here? Jamal Danga. Okay. Maybe he's still on his way. Identity formation, disciplinary power, and punishment of colonial Nigeria by Ebunoluwa Iyamu. You are welcome. Then lastly, but not the least, speaking from the shadow of Macaulay, the career of Ogundekwe Macaulay by Muftau Jimo. You are welcome. Now, I will commence immediately so that we don't be, the time will not be against us. I'll begin by calling on Bright Alozie and Timothy Anyam to do their presentation. You have 15 minutes to do that.
very conference as well. It's currently 17 Portland, Oregon. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make it. I'm so glad that the provision made for attendance, and thank you for the support and the backroom staff for making this possible. So I want to believe that I can share my screen. So because I'm going to pull up my slide for this presentation. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Friends, you can see my screen, correct?
Yeah, you can see your screen.
All right. Thank you. All right. So slideshow. All right. So our paper is titled Feet on the Ball, Minds on the Right. Women, Football and Protest in Eastern Nigeria, 1892 to 1989. So originally this work set out to terminate in 1975. But as a result of our findings, we extended it to 1985 due to some significant events that happened between 1975 and 1989. So my name is Bright Alozie, um, and my co-presenter is Timothy Anyanwu, who is unavoidably absent at the moment. I guess I will start my presentation by sharing some of the documents that informed this particular research. So on February 17th, 1939, there was a newspaper report in one of the nationalist dailies, the West African Pilot. In this report, it featured a football enthusiast, a football fan, who was asking the editor of the West African Pilot his stance on women's involvement in football in colonial Eastern Nigeria. And the context of this question was a period when women were not allowed to participate in football, on major sporting activities. So the fan asked enthusiastically, "Do you approve of women's football team? If not, why should women not play football?" So the editor responded affirmatively and said, yeah, they supported it. And they even recommended measures that should be in place so that women could be integrated to participate fully in football. Well, fast forward to 1950. In the Daily Times of June 2, 1950, the British government, then Nigeria was still under the British, administration, colonial administration. The British government sent out a declaration, a warning of sorts, throughout its empire. It threatened to ban any field or sporting activity that allowed women to, any field or sporting ground, please, that allowed women to play football, or more appropriately for US folks, soccer, so that they're going to ban any field and even officials that allowed women to play soccer. And here is, in part, the statement that the British government released. The England Football Association has forbidden the use of the grounds of its affiliated clubs and has ruled that no official of any affiliated club nor a registered referee may assist in the organization or playing of a match in which, take note, in which the players are females. Now, please take note of this other clause here, in either the empire or Olympic Games. So essentially, whether in any of the British empires, in any of the British colonies, rather, no match should be played where players are females. And by extension, this meant that this rule, this ban applied to pretty much British Africa during this period. And of course, we know that Nigeria was one of Britain's most important African colony. Following that publication in the same 1950, an official colonial edict went out. In fact, this edict was signed into law. It became legislation, which now officially prohibited women from participating in football activities in colonial Nigeria. Undoubtedly, by this time, there was an increased popularity in women's participation in football. In fact, there was even a legitimate threat that the women will usurp participate male dominant sport. For context, as we all know, British administration was a quintessentially structured administration. So the British government was determined to suppress this challenge. The men were biting more than they could chew. What we get to see during the period and in the period, at least up till 1989, what we get to see is national oppression of women's rights and denial of their rights during this period. Ideally, there was potential for women to respond or react. Of course, we know that colonial rule in Africa, the indigenous structure of things, even the agency of influence of women. So, and their participation in the sport that they love as well, beautiful game of football, or to become a weapon, a tool of a metaphorical tool, so to speak, to provoke change, to resist, to protest. So essentially, our study sheds light on this much neglected role of women in Eastern Nigeria in sports, in protest, and in politics. Now, I am particularly a scholar of protests, and of course, a student for life in right. My focus leans on women, protests, people power, and all that. But what we found on our study is that there's little to nothing on of protests, but in the colonial period. So we began to dig through the archives, throughout the archives in Nigeria, at Ibadan, Enugu, and Calabar, and of course, the archives in the United Kingdom. So, and we, uncovered several documentary sources that attest to how much women used or weaponized football as a means to provoke resistance and change. Hence, this study became very significant. Of course, it adds to our understanding of female agency, of resistance, and of course, of protest movements and social movements. So in addition to the records we got at the archives, of which we had a couple of colonial petitions where women, these female sports figures petitioned the colonial state, for their right to play football, for their right to be on the field. But more importantly, how these sports persons also use petitions to petition for the rights, general welfare and rights of course, canvassing for equality as well. Additionally, we interviewed about 14 respondents, so oral histories and oral testimonies were very important in our study. And what we sought to do in our paper was to uncover the several strategies and measures and ways that these women, used football, on one hand, playing that beautiful game of football, and on the other hand, having their minds set on, the denial of their rights and fighting to reclaim that right and, aim for greater equality, for greater representation, and of course, for what was due them in that game of football. In framing our study, we decided to lean on the post-colonial lens or perspective, and by that I do not mean after colonial rule. No, it's that lens that decolonizes colonial dichotomy, so to speak. We counter colonial positions and stance, on women's participation in football, which essentially did not saw women as next to nothing. right? So instead, we used the game of football and the protests that the game engendered within the women folk in the colony to locate female agency and situate these women at the center of colonial and immediate post-colonial resistance politics. So here, throughout our paper, we engaged with several contestations of power between the subjects, the colonial subjects, and those who were in power. And indeed, as we began to unpack the agency of African women, we also located their voices. Of course, it's a very important aspect of historical research these days that we necessarily have to locate authentic African voices. So all of these perspectives help us to not just question these dichotomies that marginalized African women, but also see how women subverted the subservient status assigned to them even within the game of football, which again, for emphasis, was quintessentially male. In line with this post-colonial perspective, we thought that James Scott's work, gives us a nice framework to address the ways that women use football to engender resistance. James Scott, in his Weapons of the Wake, talked about hidden and public transcripts of resistance. So in this sense, we interpreted football protests by Nigerian women, particularly Eastern Nigerian women, we interpreted it as part of the public transcripts of resistance, where through prescribed actions, certain language choices, or roles that these women have, they were able to challenge this power, these abuses of power or the denial of their rights. Hence, football became that metaphorical transcript of sorts where they could continue to resist and dissent. And, if time allows me, I'm going to give
You have
a little
Brad.
historical.
Hello, Brad.
Yes, please.
I've
Yes.
just 2 minutes to round up. 2 minutes to round up.
All right. So, and in the context of this, sports, please, football or soccer became that method for them to resist. So since I'm in want of time, I'm just going to share a few of, these ways that they used football to engender resistance. So bear in mind that by the 1940s and 1950s, women were banned, from participating in the beautiful game of football. Just look at the record here. From 1929, they were already actively involved in playing football. But how did they achieve this? Now, they moved away from spaces that were government controlled and moved to spaces like church fields, school fields, and the rest. And they started to engage in novelty marches, friendly marches, 1940s, 1943, 1945, 1953, 1954. As at 1953 and 1954, the official edict had gone out that they were officially banned from playing football. But look at the records here. They were still playing football. And even after independence, one would expect that women, that the ban will be lifted. But one of the legacies of colonial rule was that most of our independent leaders kind of took the legacies hook, line, and sinker. So women were still banned, I think, up till 1989. It was not until 1989 that the Football Federation, Nigerian Football Association, removed the ban. But this ban could not have happened without the activism and protest of women on the field. Like in 1971, when they formed, a club and continued to defy post-independent, post-colonial pleas, Nigerian leaders, and said, no, we are going to play this game. They kept on playing.
Right. Hello.
Unsurprisingly, I'm going to round up in a minute. Yes.
Time is up.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, all the evidence that we have leads to the conclusion that football protests by women during the period that we studied, served as a means to resist. It served for them to assert their human rights. It also played a role in shaping the Eastern Nigerian region's football culture. And indeed, it is this activism, this advocacy that our research seeks to amplify. Friends, I'm happy to engage much more with us all in this subject, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Yes, Bright have tried to look at female football generally and the opposition of the colonial regime and the protest through different ways by going to areas that the British are not under their control to play football secretly. And with all those proceedings that took place subsequently, today we have football match being played in the global arena that women all over the world today play football and contest to compete for cups that are being won by different countries. Having said so, we now move to the next presenter, Jamal Tanga, to do his presentation. 15 minutes. He's not around?
Yes.
Okay, maybe he's still on the way, and he's not online? Okay. Okay, we now call on Ebunoluwa Iyam. Eboluwa Iyam to do his presentation.
15 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, good day, everyone. My name is Eboluwa Iyam, and I'm a doctoral student at Science 4. I'm studying the history of punishment and prison in colonial Nigeria, well, Southern Protectorate of Nigeria, 1900 to 1967. So my presentation today is going to be like a bit summary of my introduction of my thesis. So I welcome a good scholarly advice on how to make my introduction better. So please can you start the slide, the presentation. So when we speak about disciplinary power and punishment, the first thing that comes to mind when everyone hears it is Foucault. I mean, I've heard so much, it's like, oh, Foucault, I don't like him. Well, sorry, I studied in the French institutions, and you can't study power or politics in French institutions without speaking about Foucault. However, I've tried my best to engage other scholars. For instance, David Galland. I've also tried David Galland's theory, sociological theory on power structure and disciplinary and punishment. I've tried David Addison. I've tried Caroline. Please can you go to the next one? I've tried the books. I've tried Imperial Reckoning by Caroline Elkins. So these are one of the top people which speaks related to my topic on how discipline or punishments are being instrumentalized by the colonial powers. Well, this concept of punishment or disciplinary power is a new field in African studies, new and not totally new, I feel, because a lot of people are running away from engaging Foucault. Well, I'll first say that a lot of argument has gone on that Foucault's theories of power structures and disciplinary powers does not work with Africa. But according to my research and my professor's works, I can say that a little aspect of Foucault actually works with Africa. Looking at Foucault's work, Foucault, please can you go to the next slide? Yeah, that's Foucault, that Frenchman smiling sheepishly. Foucault work on discipline and punish actually looked at the traced how Western countries, especially France, as involved when it comes to punishment. It looked at it starting from the medieval period, how torture was being instrumentalized, used. Well, if you read it, it's very graphic. I mean, it described how people were being tortured, the chain of the skin, the burning and everything. So it showed the evolution of how this process has evolved in Western countries. And I feel that same process also works with colonial Africa. However, in a different direction, because ours came as a full force, while in Western countries, it came as a gradual process, leading to what the current penal structure which they have now. However, Nigeria has a penal structure, even though most of the penal structures were forced on Nigeria, but it still went through a specific process. So my argument is that when punishment, colonial punishments or colonial structures were imported to Africa, it started from the raw state, which Foucault described as the process of torture. So a lot of records, I've been to the archives, there are a lot of records which describe the methods in which Africans were being punished, the torture and everything. Please, can you go to the last slide, which has the newspaper article? The last slide. Yes. So this is the newspaper article, which I found so many newspaper articles talking about how individuals were being punished, actually whipped and flogged like babies. So a lot of Nigerians were actually taken to the public places and they were flogged, they were stripped of their clothes and they were being flogged. And this didn't only deal with native Nigerians alone. It involved almost all Africans, both non-native Nigerian African, meaning non-native. When I talk about non-native, meaning others like Sierra Leoneans and other Indians that worked in colonial Nigeria, that rule also protected to them. So they were being flogged and beaten in the public, and they were also being taken to prison. So this is to show that a method of punishment, of torture and punishment, which existed in medieval Europe, actually also existed in Nigeria. However, there was also a transition, also the same thing in Nigeria through the introduction of the criminal codes and other ordinances. However, in colonial Nigeria, our ordinances took so many violent forms. So one of the main purpose of the ordinances and laws which we had during colonial Nigeria was just to enforce punishment and enforce total control. Please, can you go back to Foucault? So speaking about disciplinary power, so Foucault says discipline is a specific technique of power that regards individual both as objects and as instruments of its exercise. So I like this quote by Foucault in one of his books. It says, I'm going to quickly read it. The body becomes a useful force only if it is both a productive body and a subjected body. This subjection is not only obtained by the instruments of violence or ideology, it can also be direct, physical, pitting force against force, bearing on material elements, and yet without involving violence. It may be calculated, organized, technically thought or out. It may be subtle. It make use neither of weapons nor of terror, and yet remain a physical order. I think, in my opinion, this really described what the colonial powers were doing in Nigeria when it comes to punishment and when it comes to enforcing power. So in other words, disciplinary power arises the power of the body by working on it as a target or object of power, or by working on the self as the instrument or subject of power. So for my thesis and for this presentation, I'll be looking at some specific aspects of disciplinary institutions, which are that's punishment as a spectacle place. Because of my time, so I'm just kind of rushing it up. So I'm looking at, I love the title punishment as a spectacle. I got it from Foucault's book where he was speaking about the display of punishment, how it's very interesting, how everyone comes out to look when there's a killing, a hanging. I'm sorry I'm excited, but I love it when I say these things. I mean, how people are being tortured, how people are being cut and beat by beat. I mean, this happened during the medieval Europe, and it's very interesting to see how individuals from Victorian era and Victorian era came to Nigeria and came to replicate the same thing, which has been abolished in European countries then. So it's very interesting to see how the mindset when it comes to civilizing mission reversed backward instead of moving forward. So so punishment as a spectacle, I've been looking at some major institutions like the prison. So my thesis is talking a lot about prisons. So in aspect of prison, native prison versus government prison, protectorate prison. So in prison, so the prison became not only as a force of serving punishment on Nigerians, it also became a force of social civilization. So there was a lot of arguments in the 1912 where there was this scandal of the whipping instead of whipping, I'll say flogging or caning. So of the flogging of a specific Nigerians, and that it got the attention of the news media, of the methods in which these people were being beaten or punished, and especially on women. I mean, the women were actually stripped of their clothes, and they were hanged, they were tied to a tree, and they were beaten. And it got the attention of the news. And from there, it got to the parliament, and there were a lot of arguments and a lot of back and forth on what is the essence of punishment in colonial Nigeria. And this also brought about regulations and control of punishment in Nigeria, which also put a lot of pressure on the prison. So the prison initially was just to number one, the colonial government gain a lot of funding, because fines, they're money. So fines, when the crimes being committed, you are given the options through the records I've read. You are given the options of paying a fine of £2 or £3. And if you can't pay for a specific period, you are taken to the prison with hard labor. So the population of the prison increased. And when they're in prison, some are also being flogged or wiped or whipped. Yeah, whipped. And a lot of them also escaped. So that also increased the violence, judicial violence in that period. So the population in the prison increased, and which also affected food ration, diseases, and so a prison that is meant to contain just 20 people because of massive incarceration, it's now having 60, 70, 100 people in it. So it becomes more of source of punishment, became more of a source of revenue for the colonial powers. So I've spoken about flogging or whipping earlier on. So fines. So due to lack of funds during the colonial rule, there was increase in taxation, which we all know, and this increase in taxation also brought about poverty, and some people didn't have means of paying them. So a lot of people were charged to the courts, and from the courts, these people still don't have this money, but instead of them giving them mercy, they just increase the fund and tell them to pay a fine again. So so those that couldn't pay the fine also had to do hard labor also. So it's punishment is just kind of like a network of governments within colonial Nigeria. It was interwoven into every aspect of the government. I'll go to the last punishment as public execution. So public execution was reserved for some specific crimes. Well, almost everything was criminalized in Nigeria then. I mean, like a lot was really criminalized in Nigeria then, especially witchcraft, juju. So I was speaking specifically on the use of juju during colonial rule and the punishment for it. So according to my research, witchcraft in aspect of using charms or juju to commit murder or thievery was a serious crime. And according to the law, they are meant to be taken to prison, like session to like minimum of 6 months in prison with hard labor. With hard labor. So while those which had an escape, there was always a rear of their cases, and a large portion of them got executed by hanging also during colonial period. Compared to other parts of British Africa, like the Kenya, we all know the story of the Mau Mau incident in Kenya. We also know about in South Africa. Public execution wasn't as pronounced in colonial Nigeria as a form of punishment compared to all those regions. Well, specifically because these regions had extreme racism laws, which number one, classified people, and number two, criminalized everything. Like I said, please, can you go to slide 9? Yeah, the one, yeah. So this is one of the evidence from the prison reports I found. Can you broaden it, please, a bit? So this is just evidence to show that punishment was a widespread during colonial Nigeria. During colonial Nigeria. So the prison population, please, can you broaden it? Is it possible? No, the other part. Yeah. So you can see that this is in 1936, and this is evidences of multiple various prisons in Nigeria, showing that prison was not, punishment was not just a thing in colonial Nigeria. It was a framework which was controlled, calculated, and utilized properly by the colonial powers. In conclusion, so in the aspect of identity formation, so punishment was actually classified according to your region. So there was a rule made by Lord Regard under his the dual mandate, which gives us an explanation of how punishment created a classification between people and how it created identities. So if you want to flog a Muslim, you have to put 3 cowries in your armpits and raise your hand up to flog a Muslim. So that means you don't have to be harsh. So when you have a cowrie in your armpit, it reduces the force of the punishment being inflicted on the individual. I think you can see my, flogging. So this is one of the documents which is talking about the flogging, where it's not that visible. So those are the ways in which these were calculated, these were controlled. But the Christians were considered as sorry? Yeah, Christians were considered as what's the name? They are not believers. So it's considered, but yeah, if they're like Muslims are the believers, right? Christians are the non-believers. So actual whipping and force are given on Christians when they are being flogged. So that's the calculation, the aspect of the identity. And the other part in which my argument is going to also base on is that, the last aspect is that punishment was actually generalized. Either you're an African Nigerian or you're non-African Nigerian, you are being, as the punishment is being inflicted on you. Thank you.
Thank you. He's online. Okay, I think we'll go to him. Okay, the man on environmental, social risk. Jamal.
Jamiu Danga Yusuf. Good morning, sirs.
Jamiu, welcome. You have the
I'm
floor.
very sorry. I am unable to join my computer, so I'm using my mobile to permit me, please.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. My work is on the environmental impact of explosive remnants of war or unexploded landmines in northeast Nigeria. Since 2009, Nigeria has been battling the Boko Haram, terrorism, or insurgency, as the case may be. And one of the tactics they have utilized is to plant improvised explosive devices in various locations with the object of first carrying out terrorist attacks, because they are often sporadic and they are often to ensure absolute damage. So they plant improvised explosive devices such as mines, and using vehicles, using bicycles, using all sorts of devices, especially in local schools, in farms, and in areas where they know that military is going to carry out operations. And because these areas are built in areas where people live, these explosives, when they explode, the object is to ambush on those military. The challenge, however, is this. Since 2016, when Boko Haram control of several territories, Nigerian troops were able to ensure that Boko Haram do not control several territories in Mongo and other areas, Bama, Magdagali, and areas bordering Nigeria, Cameroon. what has happened is that the government has been trying to return displaced people places. In the process of returning people back to those places, exploded mines, these unexploded devices that have been planted by Boko Haram, ambushing the military. This has impacted Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me, please?
It's a network challenge, but go ahead. Can hear you now.
Okay, so on 20th, on 7th January 2020, a boy in the Nigerian-Cameroon border went to a Whitby and picked up killed 8 people and injured another 26. The Nigerian side of the Cameroon border. On 18th November, we were injured of an exploded device. This is aside from the various military
Network.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes. Now, go ahead.
So, aside from military that have been attacked, many of whom are usually as women and as displaced persons are being returned back to their the result of these unexploded devices in various places in Northeast Nigeria. What is the other
We are not hearing you. Hello. So what are we going to do? When the time is, we are stopping.
that war between Yugoslavia and the ordnance used were discovered to be returned back to their homes. Since this 10 kilometers Egypt used even during the Arab-Israeli is that Nigeria we need to experience of war, such as cluster munitions. It provides explosive devices. This study therefore argues is revictimizing members of the Nigerian community in the east of Nigeria, especially as government is attempting to resettle them back in their previous homes. Women will not be able to go to farm, and if they do, they will be victimized. Flows farm, agricultural, or other economic activities. This is aside from they make areas inhabitable, cause toxic elements that come out those devices. Thank you very much for
by she. Good morning, ladies and and thank you to NSC for this wonderful platform. My paper is still at experimental stage. Working on Lagos history in the last couple of years, you agree with me that you find Macaulay everywhere, about Macaulay. And for those of us who work on Nigerian politics from the late colonial period up to 1945 or 1960, through the transfer of power, you encounter Macaulay on every newspaper, library, archives. That's been the question about the complete aspect of Macaulay's life. If you visit Kennedy Library at the University of Ibadan, at the topmost floor, you find the manuscript section where you have Macaulay's paper, Fumilayo's Kuti's paper. That tells a summary of a similar narratives about life of Ogundigbe Macaulay and about Macaulay. About Macaulay was a journalist. He was a public relations consultant. It was everything you can think. And his most prominent episode of his life was the involvement in the traditional tussle in Lagos, the royal tussle, the land case, and the Dosumu and the Eleko affairs. And about 50 years after, his son also was involved with the traditional institution of Adeyinka Oyekon, who actually contested, to be Oba of Lagos, but lost to Musa Edeku Adele, and the case went to Privy Council in London. And Ogundigbe Macaulay was a private secretary, played similar role to his father about Macaulay. So when you look at Ogundigbe Macaulay's paper, though there are similarities and overlaps with about Macaulay paper, but his paper contains a very, very vital information about post-colonial Nigerian politics, especially his activities with the young and radical Zikist movements and their involvement in organizing protests, writing petitions, and whatever. And he was also a politician. It is quite instructive that when his father died, of course, he left the last word of about Macaulay was tell Ogate to keep the flag flying. But Ogate got involved in politics and he became an elected representative at the Lagos Town Council. Another interesting aspect of his life was its legal problem. Don't forget that Abba Macaulay also got involved in a legal problem when it was either correctly jailed or not. That's a debate for another day. Then Ogate also got involved in a legal problem in late 1970, where he was alleged to have demanded for bribe, to influence bus routes in Lagos with the Lagos City Council. And he was jailed with the now famous penal code 419. And that is where that stop actually criminal. Yes, the 419 is a penal code in Nigerian criminal justice system. So Ogedengbe Macaulay was, jailed under that penal code. But he came out, and after his brief stay, because we tend to concentrate our attention on the importance, the significance of their father. If you take a look at Ogedengbe Macaulay's paper, it tells you much about the contentious issues that define the Nigerian post-colonial politics, especially from in the 1970s, the Zikist movement, the struggle of the NCNC to gain, control of political space of the Southwest, the resistance of the Action Group, and the position of Lagos, because Lagos has always been a buffer zone between the contentious issues that define NCNC and Action Group. So Ogedengbe Macaulay aligned himself with Obade Emeka Oyekon in order for him to also play that important role, as of course you all are aware the active nature of Nigerian politics in the post-colonial period. If Ogedengbe Macaulay have not used the traditional tool of Oba Oyekon, perhaps he will have ended up as just an aspirant.